Shalom, shalom. This is Elder Ephraim, all the way in the Gulf, to drop another biblical nugget and or token for your spiritual edification. Today I'm going to be talking about a doctrine that's floating around town. It's called Preterism, something like that. Preterism. And it's a doctrine that's teaching or conveying where Hamashiach Yahushua or Yahusha came for the second time, that we shouldn't be waiting for a second coming, because he already came according to that doctrine. I found it to be intriguing, so I looked into it. And usually when I look into things, I always like to go to the origins of a thing to determine value, its relevance, its importance. And lo and behold, what I found was that it's a doctrine that was originated in the 16th century during the time of the Protestant Reformation. Protestant Reformation has to do with people that chose to rise up against the Catholic Church, opposing their ways and separating and starting their ways. So you get the Baptist, the Pentecostal, the Jehovah's Witness, non-denominational, this religion, that all stems from the Protestant Reformation. The reason that this doctrine was birthed was because when the Protestant Reformation occurred, the Catholic Church was then perceived as an antichrist organization. And so there was a gentleman by the name of Louis de Alcázar, something like that, a European Spaniard who was so committed to the Catholic Church. He was a Jesuit. He was part of a special organization birthed from the Catholic entity. When the Protestant Reformation occurred, that was a doctrine that was established to deter the view of being perceived as an antichrist movement, to throw the people off, and that's the birth of it. So now I have a problem with that. Why? Because the scripture says in Ezekiel and Deuteronomy chapter 4, Deuteronomy chapter 28, Ezekiel, I don't remember what chapter, but it talks about that the Israelite people need to be careful that they don't follow wood and stone. Wood being the Christian, wood, the cross, all of that, and the stone representing the Islamic that's in a part of Saudi Arabia, where people go for their religion and what have you. They have their convictions. So you have the Catholic entity that's considered the mother of Christianity. All the Protestant church came from there. A lot of them still, even though they separate, they still follow Sunday worship. And now you have this pre-trio doctrine or whatever, which now, unbeknownst to me, based on the history, if you're following that, by default, then you're a Catholic Christian. I have no problem with that. If you're a Catholic and you're following certain doctrinal practices of the Catholic people, respect. If you're an Islamic person or a Muslim, Arab following, that doctrine, so be it. No problem. I have no problem with you. And I come to that conclusion because if you go to Matthew chapter 15, Matthew chapter 15 starts off where the Pharisees are defined in Matthew 15. Matthew 15, verse 2 or so, it says that the Pharisees are elders that have doctrines that contradict the Most High. That's Yahushua talking to them, Jesus talking to them, and this is a conversation. Now, what's interesting, as he's talking to them, he goes on to his disciples, he tells his disciples, listen, you see these guys that are blind and leading the blind, and the blind allowing the blind to be led? No problem, leave them alone. So I say that to say this. If you're a Christian, Catholic, so be it, I'm going to leave you alone. If you Arab, Islamic, this, that, or whatever, no problem, I'm going to leave you alone. Because I'm encouraged as an Israelite, the Pharisees, which are elders with their own traditions that contradict, leave them alone. So if you're a Catholic, if you're Islamic, peace be upon you. Do what you do. But if you're an Israelite and you're swaying our people into those different doctrines of men, now we have a problem. And so you have to be careful that in your zeal, you get so zealous that you lose track of what's going on. The scripture says in Matthew chapter 18, It's better for you to put a stone around your neck, throw it into the depths of the sea, than to offend one of our people. When I get phone calls of people concerned about what's being said in certain circles that are so-called Israelite circles, and there's concerns about continuing in those congregations because of the offense they're feeling because of this new teaching, now we have a problem. Now we have to address it. So it's important that you remember that this is a life or death journey. This journey is life or death. And the Most High is not to be mocked. When you start offending his little ones that are striving and are second, and you put them in a position to second guess their journey and their walk and their commitment based on Jesuit practices, I would be concerned, especially as a leader. I would definitely be concerned as a leader, because now you're playing with fire. Now, that being said, let me speak to the congregants, the parishioners, those that allow people to speak into your life, be it any leader, any elders. As you see throughout Scripture, there are elders that bring their own tradition to the table that Yahushua himself, Jesus, has a problem with. It's your responsibility, because your salvation is a life or death journey. It's your responsibility to make sure that the people you allow to speak into life qualify. According to Numbers chapter 5, verse 2, it stipulates realms of uncleanliness. You have people that are unclean with visible ailments. So it says leprosy, which is a visible ailment where it can be seen with the naked eye. It's not limited to that. That's just the example. It's a metaphor because it's telling you something that's visible. So it could be measles, chickenpox. Your arm got cut off and your hand is raw, or your hand is slit open, or you just got raw stitches everywhere. Like you're in an unclean state. You have to stay away according to Scripture. The Scripture says you may have issues. Issues will be hidden issues that may not be visible. For example, when it's talking about the woman's menstrual cycle in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, I think chapter 15, it's talking about, it identifies her menstrual cycle as her issue. She has an issue. So meaning, it's not visible to the naked eye, but she has an issue. A man having a discharge, it may not be visible, but he has an issue. So when he has an issue, he's required to stand down. He's considered shut up. Shut up, or YAH shut him up, means that he was set apart. And then you have circumstances like, if you touch a dead body, you're unclean for a period of time as well. 7 days or whatever, you're unclean. And so out of respect for the congregation and the culture, you're required to stand down. A good example of that would be when you look at Jeremiah chapter 36, when Jeremiah was given a mandate by the Most High, right? And then around verse 4 or 5, it'll tell you that he was shut up. He called Baruch. He said, listen, I'm going to shut up right now, meaning I'm set apart, because he was unclean for whatever reason. Doesn't specify what uncleanliness. Now, being unclean can be sin, as well as it don't have to be sin. It could be just a circumstance that occurred, versus it could be because of a sin. All right? But anyway, so what did he do? He understood protocol, biblical protocol, and there was a barrier between him and the congregation, which was Baruch, his scribe, his mentee. And he spoke into his life, and it was what it was. I say that to say, you got people that are speaking into your life that don't qualify based on Numbers chapter 5, verse 2. And if you're allowing those people to speak into your life, that's on you. To each his own. If you want to allow yourself to be led by a blind or unqualified individual, it doesn't mean that the person's not of the Most High. They're not of the Most High. I'm not saying that the Most High can't speak to them, because the Most High spoke to Jeremiah, but Jeremiah knew his place. He put a filter between him and the congregation and allowed Baruch to speak on his behalf. If you're allowing these people, these leaders, to speak into your life with visible ailments or with issues, speak into your life, we have a problem. That's out of order. Recently, on a TikTok reel, there was a ministry where the pastor had to be rolled in, like in a wheelchair type of cart, because he was so big. He was so big that even getting out to get on the pulpit, he was being helped by like 4 or 5 usher members, because he was so big he could barely walk. He was wobbling. The first impression, what do you get when you see a person like that? You see a person that has a gluttony spirit. That's the first impression you get, is a gluttony spirit. You got people that are walking around with all these ailments, these sicknesses and diseases, and they're on the pulpit trying to teach you. They're out of order. And if they're out of order, the congregation is out of order. If the congregation is out of order, eventually the heartbeat of that congregation is going to cease. Because they lack the discipline to put that barrier before them and let the next generation bring the message across. Because of their arrogance, like, oh, it's all about me. The Most High spoke to me like I'm the man, like I'm it. Oh, tell your coworker to come to me. Tell your wife to come see me. Like if it's all about you, that's a problem. And we have a problem when we esteem people so much that we allow them to violate Scripture because of our either our love for them or our fear of them. And it's important that when you are in a position where you're starting to get offended, you need to start asking questions. Start scrutinizing. You should have done it in the beginning, and you didn't, no problem. But now that you're getting offended, now you're being put in a position to check them. And if they don't have no answer for them, it says a lot about what you need to do next. Because again, listen, your life is your life. I respect your decision. Understand that your salvation is a life or death journey that you dictate. And if you're not mature enough to understand that, you and your household are in jeopardy of losing your salvation. These people are escorting you to the slaughterhouse. And what they need to do is they need to put a rock around them and put them because of the position that they're putting you in. Again, if they're Christian and that's their decision, so be it, stay in your lane. If they're Muslim and that's their position, stay in your lane. But if you're an Israelite, make sure that the people speaking to you are keeping you within the book of our culture and not deterring you off of the path into Jesuit-type practices, Catholic-type practices, and things of such. Remember, in the end days, our people are going to start falling away. And when they're doing something so blatantly, transparently, something so evident, where they're literally uprooting you from your Hebraic culture into doctrines of Jesuit doctrines like pre-tree or whatever it's called, I would definitely suggest, and listen, I'm that confident. I'm so confident in this position that I would say this. Because it's a life or death journey, if I'm right and you're wrong, let death be the outcome. If you're right and I'm wrong, let death be the outcome. I have no problem with that. That's how confident I am. Now, if you're that confident, all you got to do is vow it. Vow it. Make that vow that you're willing to give up your life in your confidence of that you're on the right path. Now, I would suggest, if you're an Israelite, stay within your lane. But if you're an Israelite, rooting up our people to go into Jesuit practices, listen, that being said, I'm going to leave the nugget there and or token. If there's any questions or concerns, I'm just a phone call, text away. I'm looking forward to hearing from you testimonially. YAH Bless.